Well, good afternoon and good morning to everyone, depending on where you are tuning in from. Um, we are in our fifth webinar of the 2025 TSAMM's Angel Tree Module Series. If you haven't been able to attend the previous four, those are available on TSAMM's YouTube channel. We'll go ahead and put the link in the chat here for you to see. We've gone over campaign settings, we've gone over applicant management, angel management, as well as distribution management. And so that really encompasses the lion's share of the system. We have two webinars left. We have one today and we have one here on Thursday. And that takes a bit more of a specific approach to a couple different items. Today, we're going to be looking at just the new features for the 2025 season. You may or may not be aware, depending on how long you've been utilizing TSAMM's Angel Tree, but we make every effort to try to improve the system from year to year. We get the feedback from the field, whether that be from support requests or otherwise, and we try to implement. We want to make your lives more efficient. We want to make your seasons a bit cheerier. And if the system can do that, by all means, we want to follow suit. You want to take an advantage here to familiarize yourself with the GoToWebinar interface if you haven't done that yet. You'll have an opportunity to ask questions. Later on, you'll post them in the system, and then I'll be able to address those at the end of the series. These questions can be about specifically things that we've talked about today, but it can also just be general questions. We've seen a significant uptick in campaigns being begun as we enter August, which means we're in full planning season for the Angel Tree season. So if you have questions, whether it be about something that you saw in a previous webinar, how certain functionality may or may not be capable within the system, go ahead and put those questions in the interface. If we don't get to your question on the webinar itself, we will be sure to try to reach out to you. Also, you can send those questions into support@tsamm.org. That is really the best way for you to get answers to your questions. I know some of you guys I deal with directly on various fronts, and by all means, I'm happy to keep doing so. But the best way for you to get answers and support to your questions as quickly as possible is to send those requests to support@tsamm.org. Our support team would be quick to be able to reply and get you the help that you need. Well, I think I stalled long enough to give a few of the stragglers a chance to get into the webinar. So we're going to go ahead and jump in today. And more so on this webinar than any other one we've been on, I'm going to be jumping around a bit. We have about 9 or 10 different things that we want to highlight that are new. Some of them you may or may not utilize. If you don't utilize the appointment feature where people come and do in-person intake after they've requested an appointment, this first one we're going to go over isn't going to be as beneficial to you. But we want to be able to give you the tools that you need to be able to proceed through your season in a more streamlined and effective manner. So we're going to jump around. Again, post those questions as you got them, and we'll just go ahead and get started. Excuse me. The first thing we're going to jump into is we're going to jump into a few new aspects as it relates to users. Now, I'm going into the admin user section. You have to have the Can Manage Angel Tree permission in order to access this site, but there are two aspects here that I want to show you. This site should look familiar to many of you, in which we add Angel Tree users. These are users that are already in the TSAMM system. Maybe they hold another role. And the users at the bottom are your local users. These are individuals that are volunteers. Maybe they're even Salvation Army employees, but that otherwise would not have standard TSAMM access, so you just add them as a local user. Now, the first thing here is you should know that if you are a local user, this is something that happens all the time, and we're trying our best to try to help mitigate this as much as possible, is people go to tsamm.org and they try to log on with their local user credentials, and that just doesn't work, right? When you go to TSAMM, it has the dual factor authentication that bounces up against your official Salvation Army login credentials. We actually have to make sure those things align perfectly to be able to pass over the necessary credentials that your local users simply do not have. And so we probably, in the throes of the season, get 1 or 2 a week of people saying that they can't access with their email and password, and it's simply that they're going to the wrong website. They're going to tsam.org. Now that was understood because last year the website, the URL that you had to go to as a local user was tsam.org/login local.dpi. As you can imagine, because it has the same prefix of tsam.org, people would regularly simply go to tsam.org and end up in the wrong place. So this might seem like a minor change, but we're really hoping that this will help mitigate some of those difficulties. And that is that we've created another website that will direct you to your local user login. And that is simply, you can see here, is local.saangeltree.org. Local.saangeltree.org. The previous website, the previous URL that you used will still work. So if you've got a shared device, if you are a repeat local user from previous years and you've bookmarked tsam.org/login local.dpi, that will still work. But if you are new, or if you're setting up a new device, go ahead and use local.saangeltree.org. That's going to help to mitigate some of those difficulties that you have as it relates to being able to get your local users logged on and squared away. By all means, you can still reach out to us if you have any questions or issues, but that's going to help to solve some of those problems. The other side of this is a new permission that can only be added to your AngelTree users, your TSAMM users. In order for me to manipulate the permissions here, I'll click on the user's name and I see all the different permissions that this person can manage. In this case, Lori Bates is set up to do intake applications and being a supervisor for that same section. There's a new permission that's available for this year. We've actually already given it to a few individuals, and that is here, can activate campaign. Up until this permission was introduced, in order to start your AngelTree campaign in a given year, you had to be 2 things. You had to have the can manage AngelTree permission, and you had to have the can activate, or you had to have the officer permission. You had to be an officer in the system. Now, there are plenty of locations, whether it be because they don't have an officer physically at that site, or because their operation is so large, the officer has designated the responsibility of AngelTree to another individual. Well, in years past, because of billing aspects and things like that, they had to reach out to their officer had to go on, register, do all the sign up, and then they would be able to begin their campaign. Well, we wanted to help solve that problem a little bit, and by doing so, we've added in the can activate campaign permission. What this means is that you still need to have the can manage AngelTree, but rather than having the officer permission, you can have the can activate campaign. So in this case, if I wanted to let Lori activate this campaign in years to come, or maybe even this initial year, I would give it both the can manage AngelTree permission and the can activate campaign. You have to have both of these permissions. If I give them just the can activate campaign without the can manage, they still won't be able to activate the campaign for this year. This is going to be really helpful, as I know on this call there are divisional social service directors, especially like in the Central Territory, where things are very much managed from a divisional level as opposed to a local level. If you have users at your locations, you can manipulate that. You can also work with your locations, or you can send us a list of users from those given locations that are utilizing TSAMM's module that maybe aren't the officer, but they're in charge and therefore have the authority to activate the campaign. But this is where you'll manipulate those permissions, you'll edit, you'll remove, add. Hopefully that's going to help to solve some of the problems that we have where people simply have to wait for their officer to come on, or we have to do other workarounds because there's not an officer at this location. So that is AngelTree users. Again, keep putting questions in the system and go to Webinars interface if you have any questions. Next, we're going to jump to the send communications. This can be used in many different ways. So send communications as a whole has been around for a really long time. It's been around I've been with the company for 3 years. As far as I can remember, this has been a part of it. However, initially, as I moved forward, it was only for applicants, and we could only send information to applicants, people who have already applied for the system. And then last year, we introduced the ability to communicate with donors, right? Being able to send a message to donors who haven't returned their gifts as a reminder that gifts are due by this Friday, or maybe sending a thank you email to those that have fulfilled, doing those over the course. Well, new for this year is being able to send communication to people who have intake appointments, people who have requested those. So in this case, I'm going to select the intake appointment requester. I'll select which intake site I want to interact with, because remember, all of your intake requests are tied to an intake site. This is going to be helpful for those locations that have multiple units within their campaign, and you only want to speak to the Louisville and not the Irving location, for instance. In this case, we're going to leave the intake site to any, but then we have 3 categories of those that they've interacted with. We can write an email to those that have requested an appointment. Maybe it's simply a note to all that have requested to say, we've received your request. We are working through scheduling. Please be patient with us. We should have this done by this Friday, next Wednesday. Just being able to send that information. If I want to send information to the requested category, I click next. And then I'm going to go through the site as I normally would. In this case, we have one individual that's requested an appointment. Same thing if I only want to look for those that are scheduled, right? I'm going to have a different set of users. And this is where we can send information that says, reminder, don't forget this list of documentation that we need to have. Bring your proof of residency, bring your identification for every person in the household. You fill out all these things. You can send reminders to them to say, hey, when you get here, please make sure that you enter on the side door. Don't show up more than 30 minutes before your designated appointment request. You can kind of fill in the blank on how you could use this tool, but now we can interact directly with those that don't technically have an application yet, so they're not an applicant, but they are appointment requesters. They are individuals that have requested an appointment or have been scheduled, or in the event that you use one that's been canceled, that they've requested and they've actually not been deemed eligible for one reason or another. Maybe you have other resources. If they're getting this email because they've been canceled, they're not eligible to sign up with Salvation Army's Angel Tree this year. But here are some other resources for you, other agencies in the community, a number they can call. Again, trying to do a couple things. This helps you maintain the touch with your individuals, helping them be as equipped as possible, right? It also allows you to help mitigate, I've used that word a lot today, help you to mitigate the number of calls coming in saying, remind me, what do I need to bring to my appointment? Or what other tools do I have? This is an easy way for you to communicate out with individuals in your intake appointment requester. All right, the next section, like I told you, we're going to jump around a bit. Our new features kind of span many different areas here in the system, and we're going to go spend a good amount of time here in our applicant records. Now, we've already touched on a lot of these in our applicant management webinar, but I also understand that some people have used the system for 5, 8, 10 years, and maybe they didn't come to the applicant management because they feel like they've got this squared away. So this new features webinar is something new that we're doing this year because we really want you to make sure, even if you don't come to all the webinars, and you don't want to listen to my voice for, I guess, a solid 6 hours, you still want to be able to get up to speed on these new features. And right off the bat, we can kind of see an initial new feature. We're able to initially see a summary total of my applicants. This is something that people have been able to figure out, but it's been a workaround at best. We know that online applications are prefaced with the AA. We know that in-person applications are prefaced with the FA. Now, maybe you didn't know that, but that's how we're able to distinguish between online applications or in-person applications. But if you want to do a quick look at your campaign and say, how many do we have in each? You don't have to set your filter, write down the number, change the filter, do that. Right off the bat here, we can just tell you in this event, we have 20 applications. 6 of them are online, 14 are in person. And as with anything in TSAMM that's blue, this hyperlink, that means it's clickable. So I can very quickly say, oh, show me all of my online applications. Well, now we've added the keywords AA, so we're getting just the online applications. And then not only that, I then can see a summary of these numbers based on the criteria. I want to highlight here the summary totals below reflect the filter criteria applied, right? So because we've applied the filter of online applications, these numbers are different than they were before. If we want to reset that, simply click Remove Filter, and our numbers are reset. Maybe you can say, well, what are my statuses of those that are in-person applications? I can simply click this number here. It'll apply the necessary filter, and now I can see my statuses have changed. So there's 2 that are supervisor approved, 12 that are admin approved. Hopefully this glimpse here will give you a really good idea as you jump in to see how many people are waiting, how many are pending, are in draft, how many are waiting to be approved, right? You can kind of see right off the bat where people are. So that's the first new feature that rolled out onto our applicant records report. Another one came out of a request that we received in previous years of I've deleted an application, right? If I come over here to these red X's over here, and I can click this, I can delete myself. We give you this warning. It's reversible technically, but we want to give you as many reversals as possible. But inevitably, people want to undelete an application. And there was technically a way to do so, but there wasn't an easy way for me to see all my deleted applications. And being able to restore those really was kind of not the best user experience. And so what we've done now is we've allowed you from your applicant records report to see all those that were declined and all those that were deleted. Right off the bat, I can just include my deleted applications here. Also, if I set my filter status to be deleted, you see it'll automatically check that box. And when I refresh, I'm going to see a couple things, right? I'm going to see in this case that Zahir was deleted. His application wasn't declined, it was deleted outright. And you've made the determination that we want to undelete this application. It was deleted in error for one reason or another. To do so, I'm going to come into the application. We notify you that it's deleted and this applicant's in read only. We also show you what the status was. So if we undelete this application, it's going to revert straight back to the status it was when it was deleted. If it was supervisor approved, it'll go back to supervisor approved. In this case, I simply come here and select undelete. We'll confirm that we want to indeed undelete this application, which is reverting this application back into its previous status. I say yes. At this point, it's as if this person was never deleted. I go back to my applicant records page and go to filter against those that are deleted. You're going to see that there aren't any records because that application has been undeleted. It's been restored. So this is a helpful component here as we go through. Another aspect on this page is these checkboxes along the side. On Angel Records, let me go ahead and open over here. In our Angel Records, these checkboxes have always been there, right? They've always been there for me to be able to select specific angels that I want to print, that I want to perform an action on. However, in applicants, it wasn't that way. So if we wanted to print only one warehouse label, we had to filter to a specific name and then print that warehouse label. Well, we've now utilized the exact same functionality that exists on our Angel Records. And in that case, I can select only those that I want to perform an action on, and then I can print my sticker labels, my warehouse labels, family labels. I can print the applications. It makes it really easy for me to perform an action on one application rather than having to filter accordingly. In previous years, we would have simply ran this entire 21 records and generated 21 warehouse labels or sticker labels, depending on however it is that we wanted to proceed. So that's another change that's here on this page. let's talk about here one of the changes that um, is going to have mixed responses. And I understand that, but hopefully we're going to spend a good amount of time here to talk you through why we went down this path and why it's important to do so. In order to do so, I'm going to go ahead and jump into one of my applications that are supervisor approved. I'm going to go into John Jones's application. Now, last year we made a change that threw a wrinkle in with those individuals as it relates to family codes. As you can imagine, when you have 800 different angel tree campaigns across the United States, people have different processes that they want to follow. They have different sequences that they take when they process an application. And last year we made a change that only assigned the family code once it's been marked into an admin approved state. Now that created an issue for those of you that wanted that family code as a part of your in-person application. The problem is that if I'll use my team member Dan, if I apply for Angel Tree and get given a family code and I get placed into a status of admin approved, and I'm given, for instance, this family code, SSB 3500, I will get an email that says, congratulations, you've been approved. Here is all of your information. Here's your pickup appointment. Here's your pickup slip. It gives me everything that I need. Now, let's say down the road, I get removed for one reason or another. Maybe I move away, and because of that, I tell the Salvation Army that, hey, I'm not going to be around to pick up my gifts, so you're going to delete my application. Maybe it's a scenario where using the angel duplicate feature, that maybe I was being a bit nefarious and I signed up my kid while my wife also signed up my kid, and so my application gets removed. Well, in previous years, when my application gets declined or deleted, it would release this family code, and then that family code could then be assigned to Dan. Now the problem is so Dan gets assigned SSB 3500. Dan gets an email saying, here's your pickup appointment, here's all of this information. All of this sounds great until both Dan and I show up to pick up gifts. And we both have an email confirming this family code that we received. Now, we know if we look in the system, we would see that mine is invalid. But when we're just looking at an email, it's going to, for lack of a better term, not be able to tell me the Salvation Army representative without a shadow of a doubt that I am indeed viable and this is my family code. Because as we see, these codes are being reassigned. So what we've done now is it'll be two ways. One, the family code has been returned to being assigned when you get a distribution appointment, right? So for those of you that do an in-person intake, if you assign a pickup appointment, they will get a family code, a correct family code, and they will be able to put that on the application, on all the things that you want to print, and they'll have everything they need when they walk out the door. However, once I move into a status of admin approval, so in this case, I'm going to go to admin approved. Once an applicant enters the status of admin approved for the first time, that is going to forever lock this family code down to me. And that's what this pop-up is telling me. It's going to say, updating this applicant status to admin approved is going to permanently assign the family code, even if this applicant is later declined. This assignment cannot be undone. I know that many of us like to keep those codes in order. And so when we're walking through our warehouse and we see a gap that goes from 210 to 212, that we know 211 is outstanding in some sense, and we want to try to help mitigate that as much as possible. However, the only way for us to properly handle the scenario of someone being declined after the email has been sent out is to do what we're doing here. There really is no way for us to get that email back. I can't reach out and say, hey, please delete that email as it's no longer valid. The nice thing is if I click confirm admin approval, it'll update this, the details have been updated, And at this point, that code is locked down. And I'll be able to, and that's the only time you're ever going to see this modal, that pop-up, is the very first time. And this brings me to our next new feature. If you have been in the system a lot, you may see that there's a new little edit pencil here on the right. Now, another scenario that we get asked is, how do I take someone out of admin approved, right? We all lean on our volunteers. We hire seasonal staff that requires us to be able to process just the sheer number of applicants and angels in a given year. But sometimes someone gets placed in the status of admin approved prematurely, and I want to be able to move them back. Well, now what I'm able to do is the button's still there. The button still is presuming a happy path. But if I want to move it back, I can come here, click the edit pencil, and I now have 4 options. I can decline this applicant outright, I can update it to supervisor approved, or I can mark it as distributed or not delivered. So in this case, I'm going to update this applicant to be supervisor approved. Now you'll see that the admin approval gets removed here at the bottom. But also, when an applicant is in supervisor approved status, their angels can't be allocated, right? So this is a way for you to lock this applicant down. Let's say if there's still pending information to be reviewed. I can simply come back, and when I move this applicant back to admin approval, you can see it just updates. There was no pop-up because there's no locking down of the family code in question. That code has already been locked down, so it's an unnecessary clarification for me to come in and remind you one more time. So that's a way for us to be able to move these individuals around the status tree, if you will, should that be necessary. And every status has a certain number of available actions. If I'm in a supervisor approved status, I can update it to be I can update it to be back to a submitted status. I can even remove my supervisor approval. The only thing that I will say is we remove the ability for you to update it back to admin approved if an angel has been allocated. So let's go ahead and look at an angel record here. And we're going to look at this angel here. Let's scroll down and find one here. In this case, Todd has been allocated. If I go to that applicant, you can see here, it's in an admin approved state. But when I go to click this edit pencil, I'm able to move, because it hasn't been adopted yet. Apologies, not allocated, but if it's been adopted. Let me jump up here to Zane here. When I come in here, if I go to update this, it's going to say there's angels for this application that have already been adopted. As such, I don't have the ability to put it back into supervisor approved. We can unallocate someone if they've been allocated, but if they've been adopted in the system, we're saying, hey, you can't move this person back. I can decline them, right? If there's a reason to decline this individual, by all means, we'll do so. But I can't simply move it back into what could be determined to be a positive state, like supervisor approved, if someone has been adopted. So just if you see this warning here, and that's why you can't move it back. So one other very quick one I'll highlight is something that's been asked before is adding an expand all feature. Simply, I can click this expand all, which will open up all of my accordions within this section as it builds out. Just trying to save you a few button clicks here or there, but when you're dealing with 400, 500 applicants, a few button clicks times 400 or 500 really can go a long way. Let me jump back to an applicant record here as we talk about just a few other changes. Let's look at Jeff Johnson here. So we've already talked about my ability to mark someone as admin approved. Let's talk here quickly about a new status called not delivered. Now this was bred out of a need within the community services integration with WellSky to basically say, hey, this individual was approved for Angel Tree, but for one reason or another, they just never came to pick up their gifts. And we wanted to be able to have accurate data flowing into community services, but also for your benefit, we want to be able to have accurate data as it relates to, we know, has someone not picked up their gifts, right? As you go towards next year and you have the ability to look at past years, should you do that as a part of your intake and vetting process? you can see that maybe an applicant for this year didn't pick up the gifts last year. There was really no way to know that previously in the system. They would simply remain in an admin approved status because they weren't distributed. We needed to add what's called a terminal state, an end of line that basically was a negative as opposed to like not delivered, as opposed to the positive delivered. If an applicant gets marked as not delivered, that won't move over to community services integration. We'll talk more about that on Thursday. I know this doesn't really apply to our Southern Territory and Eastern Territory friends, but that'll be important for our Central and Western Territory. A few other highlights here. One of them is in this communications sent interface. One thing that gets asked a lot is, how do I resend someone their pickup information, right? Some people get approved for Angel Treat in August and early September. So it's completely understandable that they've lost an email 3 months later when they come to do their pickup, right? It's completely understood why that takes place. And we want to give you the ability to resend that information. To do so, I simply come into my communication sent, and you can actually see all of the emails that's been sent to this application. Here's one where they get an email related just simply that their application's been created. And if they want to continue their application, they can go there. But here I have an appointment confirmation. Now you might say, why do they have two? Well, that's because what we know by looking at the system, this individual actually got their appointment invitation updated, right? Maybe someone calls you on a Monday and says, you schedule me for Monday, but I work on Mondays. Can you update it to Wednesday? Well, when you update that appointment and they're in an admin approved state, it sends another notification for their pickup appointment. So in this case, we can see here, and I can simply come here and I can resend the email. I can also update where the email is sent. Should they say, listen, can you send that email to my wife or my husband or my parent? Because I'm locked out of my emails and I need to get the pickup information, right? So this is a really easy way. I can simply resend that email, give me an "Are you sure?" and then it'll resend that email. If I refresh within this accordion, you can see right off the bat that email got resent, right? So we're going to be able to go ahead and see information that gets resent. This is also a really easy way for you to see what the applicant sees, right? So if there's ever any questions about the communication that they've received, you can do that here in this state. All right, the last thing, believe it or not, we're coming down the pipeline to the end. The last thing we're going to do has to do with bulk application updates. We have expanded. We previously had this bulk application update, but it was restricted only to those that were in kind of awaiting to be submitted, right? I had to go into a different section to be able to update them to be admin approved. Additionally, we wanted to be able to give people the ability to bulk update individuals into a not declined, but a distributed state or not delivered, right? We going into that final terminal state. Now, previously, if you used this tool in the past, we kind of forced your hand to apply filter settings that would only allow me to submit or only allow me to do other components, right? And so this is a way for me to be able to expand that out. So the first thing I'm going to do, if I want to do things in bulk, is I have to set my statuses accordingly. So let's say I simply want to update everyone that's in supervisor approved status to admin approved. I don't want to go through every single application. All I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to go to set my filter to be supervisor approved, which is the status right before admin approved. In this case, there's one, so maybe it didn't save as much time. And you can see when I select this option, I have different options. I can return the applicant, I can delete it, I can decline it, or I can admin approve it. In this case, I'll go ahead and admin approve it. And we're good. So that application's been admin approved. In the same way, if I want to come in and only submit those that are in a pending status, I can go ahead and select those and be able to update those. But the newest component of this is that I want to be able to go through and I want to update all of my individuals to be distributed or not distributed. So let's say I'm going to come in here. I'm going to select the box at the top, which selects all the boxes down the line. And I'm going to remove these 4 for the sake of demonstration. And I'm going to update all 12 of these applications to be distributed. I click distribute, click submit. And now all of those applications have been distributed. I'm good to go. And then these other 4, they didn't show up. I'm going to update those to be not delivered. Sweet, I'm done. I no longer have to go back application by application to update them to be distributed. Now, I will say, if you use the distribution management toolkit, which I highly suggest you at least explore, because it really will save you some time, those distributed ones will be automatically updated. But now if I go back into my applicant records, I can see I've got 13 that are distributed. I've got 4 that are not delivered. I can do those bulk updates I can do those bulk updates as I need to handle. So those are our new features for this year. There are 2 new features. There's a new permission and a new interface as it relates to community services, but we're going to hold off on that until Thursday because that doesn't apply to everyone, and we've dedicated an entire webinar to just that interaction. So we're going to come in here and we're going to go ahead and by all means, I'm going to take some questions. Dan, go ahead and highlight those that I need to. I think you've answered a good bit number of components. We'll go ahead and highlight some of the questions. We've got a question asking, can we customize the donor reminder? So I think you're talking, Kim, if you're talking about the one we send out through the mass communications tool, so if you're going into your send communications and sending an email to your donors, that can be updated. That can be dynamically created. If you're talking about the system-generated reminder that says, hey, this applicant has gone in and they this applicant has updated or this donor hasn't returned their gifts and we want to automatically remind them, that content is not customizable. At least not this, but that's a good suggestion that we can talk to you about for implementing in future years. But right now, that system-generated automatic one is not one that can be responded. Similarly, can we send out multiple appointment reminders? And that is correct. So if I go into my send communications tool and I utilize my intake appointments, or we want to send an email to just those that have been scheduled, it sounds exactly what it means. That's the status. I can also see who I would get that by coming here into my intake appointments report. I can see here are the individuals that have that appointment. When I set my filter settings to be any intake site that's been scheduled, it will give me as many as exist on this report, right? As long as they exist on this report, that means they are scheduled. And I can send one email that goes out to 900 people. I know Memphis utilizes this tool extensively for their intake. And so they're going to be able to go in and in the span of probably about 2 or 3 minutes, email every single person that has a scheduled appointment for them to come through. Let me see if there's any other questions in here that I need to highlight. Not as many today, so I've got a few here. Let's go ahead and send out. Jill asks, does the email tracker record direct emails sent through the Angel Tree program? When you say direct emails, there isn't an interface to where I can just pull up this individual. Now, let me clarify. I can unselect all into my donor, and I can send an email from the mass communications tool to just Susan. The answer is yes. That will show up in the communication sent. Let's not go too far, but the logic that exists when we pull this up is we are looking over the last 4 months, every email that went to this email address. In this case, it's probably email@gmail.com or jeff@email.com. Every email from Angel Tree that went to jeff@email.com over the last 4 months will appear in this accordion, right? So that's going to be mass communications. That's going to be system-generated emails. And so that's going to be able to get you squared away just like that. Hopefully that answers your question, Jill. Just go ahead and add another question there if you can. A few other questions. All right. Shan asked, did you say in an earlier training we're able to customize our campaign questions to say what documents a family needs? Listen, absolutely. In your campaign settings, let me go ahead and open a new tab just to help me save some time. Under the documents in my campaign settings, this is going to be documents that I can customize and say exactly what I want. You may recall from the webinar, we typed in lease agreement, comma, rental, recent utility bill, or printout. I think you have around 150 characters to utilize, maybe not as many as we have on Twitter or X nowadays, but you've got a good amount to be able to request those. I will say that this is only utilized for online intake. So if putting your required documents here does not require them of someone that comes and does in-person intake. The presumption being that anyone who's doing in-person intake would know what documents they need to check. And this is going to ask them based on the applicant angel, etc. There's some FAQs about that. You also want to take a peek at that campaign settings. That's going to be from our very first webinar all the way back to see there. A few more questions here. All right. Casey asks, is there any plan to add an option to the communication options to allow you to send messages to prior year applicants in order to invite them to sign up? This is something we use in our third-party software. Anytime you say, are there any plans to, I can say there isn't anything in the current pipeline. There is a way for us to be able to, man, Casey, that is a great idea. And but it's just not in place. So one thing that we'll definitely look to add for next year is when we go into send communications, and we go ahead and select my applicants group here. One thing that we're going to want to change for this year is where we can select a campaign, right? So it's going to default to my current year's campaign, but then I can go ahead and use the mass communication tool. Casey, don't hold me to this, and I'm glad it's on a webinar that's going to be recorded and posted on YouTube, but I think that might be a pretty low ask, right? So no promises. I'm going to hold all 155 of you to this. Don't hold me to this, but I might be able to get that in for this year. We'll see. It might not be out there as soon as we'd like, but let me talk to our development team because I really think we can turn that around pretty quickly. All I'm going to be doing is adding another filter that allows me to grab that list from previous years. So don't hold me to it. If it's not this year, I'll definitely get that on the list for next year because that's a really good idea to help you kind of inform individuals, right? Communication is key. And having been a Corps officer, I know what it's like to just be flooded with phone calls, simply people asking for updates, asking for information. So if we can mitigate that, by all means, we want to be able to handle that. Lily asks, can we send an email to remind those who are in draft status to complete their application? We usually delete applications that are in draft status after 10 days. So you can. So if you had just asked the first question there, Lily, I would have said absolutely, right? I can go back into my send communications. I'm going to select my applicants, and I'm going to set my status to draft. I'm going to be, and at this point, I'm able to send a mass communication out to say, hey, if you don't submit your application by this Friday, we will delete it. What we don't do is be able to only send it to those that are in draft that were started in this date range, right? So you couldn't isolate out your draft applications, but you could very easily send a notice every Friday to all of your draft applications that says, if your draft, just a reminder, if you're getting this email because you've started an Angel Tree application and we're happy to give you the time to finish it. However, if your application hasn't been submitted within 10 days, your application will be deleted to allow space for other individuals, right? So that's a way for you to be able to target it. It'll go to everyone, even if they just started their application an hour before you send out the email. So you'll want to be mindful of that you don't say on Thursday your application will be deleted if it's not done by Friday, if you're genuinely giving them 10 days. Because someone who maybe started 2 hours ago, or anyone who maybe just be actively in the process but they haven't submitted, they'll get that email as well. And so we want to give that clarity. It's the old adage. Anytime you get those like bill reminders or things like that, where it starts to say, if you've already paid this, thank you so much. But if not, here's the information that you need, right? So kind of use that as some guidance as you're communicating to help lessen some of those questions. Sandra asks, is there an easy way to translate applications in English when they've arrived in a different language? There is not currently a mechanism in the interface that if you've instituted a free-form text field, that they would be then able to kind of translate it back to English. I know that there are browser systems, but if you give someone a need, for instance, and that need is a free-form text field, you didn't use the custom list like we talked about before. You can kind of do that in your campaign application settings. But if you don't use the drop-down and they type in pantalones, the word that's going to be there is pantalones, right? And when it comes to automatic translation, and my wife speaks Spanish, and so it's going to get close. It's not going to be perfect. And so we highly encourage those individuals that use online intake to use those pick lists. When it comes to need and wish, have them select a drop-down rather than having them type of free-form text that's going to save you a lot of time, both in translation and in kind of in reviewing, because you're not going to have people asking information otherwise. All right, just a few other questions here. So the question, I think it's Allie. Allie asked, would the ability to send communications to last year's donors also be applied? And you guys are, the answer is yes. The more we add to this, the longer it takes to get out. I'm going to talk to a developer right after this call just to kind of see like, hey, what kind of effort would this take? How quickly can we get this out there? Because I really think it's going to be beneficial for you guys. If it does, we'll send out a mass communication just to say, hey, there's a new feature that wasn't covered on our new features call, but that makes complete sense. I don't know much use case to do that for your appointment requesters because those statuses would adjust. So Amanda asks about keeping copies of the communication in previous years as a way of record keeping purposes. That way we know when clients were contacted about their apps. So they will be kept for what is anticipated to be the length of your campaign. What I mean by this is the system is looking at emails sent within the last roughly 4 months. I'm not going to get into the technical terms of how we kind of derive that, but that's kind of the idea behind it. So, but if I pull up a report from last year, or the year before, or 2021, from a performance standpoint, to go in and search through the entire database to find all the emails for all time that are associated with here, it's just not practical. And so it is for record keeping in this campaign, right? If I go in December, I'll see emails sent in September. If I go into a previous year's applicant and look at their sent communications accordion, that won't show up there, right? So it's meant to be recent communications. All right, we've got probably about 10 minutes left, but I think I've answered most of the questions that are here. By all means, thank you so much for coming. We got one more webinar on Thursday for community services. This video will be posted on our YouTube's page here, probably within the next 36 to 48 hours. I'll keep you posted for that. But by all means, thank you guys very much. The links to the YouTube will be in the chat thread here. If you want to be able to go and see that, that's youtube.com/TSAMM library. If you just like to type instead of copy or click hyperlinks. But have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much, and we look forward to interacting with each one of you in the very near future. Thanks.